Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're faded, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change.
Oh my God, my camera's not working right. Great. How did this happen? Let me see if I can get this. Every once in a while, it does this. Here we go. I don't know why. Just weird program. And hello, JC. Yeah, it's been a little while. All right, everyone. I don't know if this is going to be a long show or a short show. Say that 3 times fast. She sells seashells by the seashore. But before we get started, along the bottom, my shameless grifting. If you enjoy this type of content, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. I would truly, truly appreciate it. And Bunchy is still freaking out. I haven't had a chance to settle Bunchy down. I actually haven't been back in the seat since I walked up yesterday. It's been crazy. And hello, Kathy. Oh my God, I just cannot even tell you. I just got out of a meeting. It was 2 hours and something, which I went to the minute I got home from work. Oh, and Wayne's like, oh, I hope you're going to get to relax soon. And I'm like, Wayne, do you really think... I'm laughing at what Nathan had to say. Do you really think I am going to get to relax soon? Next weekend's an LNC meeting. So he knows how crazy it gets for getting ready for an LNC meeting. There's a lot of secretarial work to do. Then, immediately after the LNC meeting, I got to do minutes. It takes about 40 hours to prepare a full set of in-person LNC meeting minutes. So I'm like, really? you think I'm going to be able to relax soon, and you want, why am I getting a British accent or whatever the hell that's supposed to be? And then right after I finish the minutes, what's then coming up? Then I'm going to be in Virginia for their special convention. Here's to you, Holly. Sorry, I can't help myself. And no, I'm not sorry. I don't even know why I'm saying I'm sorry. I'm not sorry at all. I'm laughing. So yeah, maybe after the Virginia convention, I'll be able to relax. But probably not, because before you know it, it's the New Hampshire convention. And then before you know that, oh, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. And hello, Ronwell, and hello, everybody. Before we get started on the show, and yes, we are going to have fun in Austin, Kathy, but we've got a plan. We've got to plan our time. So before, though, I get started with the LNC update, and I'm glad there's another LNC member here, because you can let me know if I'm forgetting anything, Kathy. But speaking of New Hampshire, Sean Dempsey, I'm trying to get this so where y'all can see him, has written 2 excellent children's books. Here's his most current one, Ava in the Storm. So if you did get this one, The Tale of Two Brothers, you might as well get this one to complete the set. But otherwise, just get them both for the young person in your life, because it really teaches very cool life lessons without being overly political to young children, because that can be, gross. But very cute books. I love the illustrations. Support a libertarian author and a sponsor of the show, and you can get them both on Amazon. And thank you, Sean. I first met Sean at PorkFest when he asked me. It's because everything's flipped on the camera. I get so discombobulated. He asked me if I would promote this book, and I said, let me read it. And then once I did, I was like, absolutely. Okay, so Nathan was laughing. The other Karen in my race is something, isn't she? Definitely a progressive. That was fun. The Republican candidate did really well in the forum. I'm happy with my performance in the forum. My name, the other person who shares my name, couldn't be more night and day to me, could she? I mean, exact like opposites. I'm like the anti-Karen. But since you watched that, Nathan, you'll know that I said some things that weren't entirely popular. I do not change my positions depending upon the audience. And you saw there was a lot of NIMBYism going on where, listen, there's some homeless that have shown up in Castle Rock and they're freaking out. But they don't want to let the church help. Because where the homeless are setting up camp right now, there are areas that they're not invited to. Like if they're on private businesses, no, they can't be there. But there's a church here, Church of the Rock, that has been inviting them to camp on their property. And giving out food and things like that. And people are wanting the zoning board and the like to take action against Church of the Rock. If you're not going to let the churches help, like, God, the NIMBYism. So, I mean, you heard what I said. I said I do believe that, just as human beings, these are other human beings, and we have to keep that in view. But my favorite line from that whole forum, which I do need to get the clip, is when I was trying to understand what that young lady was asking about with public lewdness, and I was like, oh, we're talking about pooping in public. Put me on record as no poopy in public. I'm on record. I'll take a stand on that issue. I am opposed to pooping in public. Very controversial. That's nasty. But not in my district, but that other candidate who actually said that there's been a survey of every homeless person in Castle Rock. A, I don't believe that. But B, every single one of them wanted to be homeless. Oh my goodness. And like, no. Yes, there are people who want to be homeless. I know that. My brother was like that. That is not everybody. Like, oh my goodness. Particularly in today's economy. Not everybody is homeless by choice. Are there people who are homeless by choice? Yes, of course. But the majority of homeless people are not homeless by choice. A lot of them have drug problems. Some of them have mental problems. Others are just desperately poor and in bad situations. And some of the ones that are homeless by choice, it's because they have mental problems. So anyway, yeah, I enjoyed that. That was my first public forum. So that was fun. So I'm really glad you watched that. Thank you, Nathan. Let me see. What else? Okay, so we're just going to go right on to LNC stuff. So yes, there is an LNC meeting in Austin this coming up weekend. I hope that anyone who is in the Austin area does come by and sit in on the meetings and come to the fundraising events we are having on Friday and Saturday. So if you are the type of person, in other words, if you're completely barking moonbat like I am when it comes to meetings and procedures, a lot of people have asked me, how did I get knowledgeable so fast on Roberts and how did I get really, really interested in it? It was from LNC meetings. From before I was on the LNC, watching them, and then after I was on the LNC, obviously, you have to get up to speed. But if you're interested in process, there's very few things as valuable as sitting in on LNC meetings. And you get to see what's going on in the business of the party. But in general, I find it interesting because of the process. LNC meetings are more formal than your typical county meeting or even your state meeting, depending upon the size of your state party. I'm sure the formality level is equivalent to like large states like New York or Texas, but smaller states, you're definitely going to learn a lot from watching the procedure of a national party meeting. And even watching them on YouTube is valuable. But if you're there in person, it's a lot of fun. And I do hope that I will see you. Now, also, the agenda for the meeting will be coming out. I think Angela said it'll be coming out tomorrow, but probably late tomorrow, because tomorrow is the last day to give notice for those items. So if you're interested as to what's going to be on the agenda, follow the LNC list. But I think 95% of the agenda is set, and it's mostly going to be a budget meeting. The draft budget, though, will be released tomorrow, and I'm sure a lot of people will pick over it. So we'll talk about the draft budget and what people are perhaps what has become controversial or what people want to talk more about. We'll maybe do a show next week on that if I can, but I'm already going to be in Austin on Friday, so maybe not. We'll try. Maybe do a show on Wednesday. I don't know. We'll try. But what's proven to be most controversial so far is Pat Ford and Robley Hall's addition to the agenda of a discussion item of potentially selling our Alexandria, Virginia offices. Now, one thing I want everyone to be clear on, because some people have freaked out, and I would have freaked out too if this is what I thought. And the light seems awful dim in here today. Like I have a shadow, but all of the lights are normal. I can't figure out what's going on. See what I mean? See, way back, like right here, I don't know, like up here. See, I think it's my... Is it microphone? I'm so like distracted. I guess that's okay. So to get one thing clearly. Oh, I thought it was Robley. Oh, is it Rich Bowen? Am I saying Pat Ford? Pat Ford. Oh, it's Pat Ford and Rich Bowen. That's right. Oh my God. Thank you, Kathy. I'm so glad you're here. I'm feeling way better today than I was yesterday. but I'm still not 100%. You're correct. Rich Bowen. And it was mostly Rich Bowen that was gathering the ire of certain people on social media. But yeah, Rich Bowen and Pat Ford. So the suggestion had come up of selling the Alexandria building. This has not been new. But one thing that people need to understand is nobody is suggesting selling the building and keeping the money in the budget. We can't do that even if we wanted to. What's on the table is selling the building and getting a different one. All of a sudden, it doesn't sound quite so bad, does it? And Nathan is correct. The building, as people donated money specifically for that. Even if we could sell the building and then just use the money for something else, I would be completely opposed to that because members donated specifically for the building fund. But we can't do that per the FEC. Money raised and used for real estate has to be kept in real estate. But the Alexandria building is potentially not a good investment and not the best place for us to own a building. There are no decisions made. No decisions will be made this meeting. It's a discussion item only. There's no action attached to it. What I suspect is that after this meeting, if it seems like there's an appetite to look into it, that a committee will be appointed tasked with researching the pluses and minuses. So there is zero chance that we will not own an office. The only question is, will it remain the Alexandria, Virginia office we have now? Now, I know some people don't like us. Some people really love us being in the DC area, and some people hate us being in the DC area. I don't care. We haven't leveraged being in the DC area. I know the idea was going to be that we were going to do lobbying efforts and stuff out of there. That never, ever happened. And being close to DC wouldn't help that anyway, particularly in this post-COVID world where so much has moved to be remote. It's not even necessary that we be close to DC now for there to be staff in a centrally located location. We haven't had staff centrally located since before COVID. So all of those kinds of considerations are no longer an option. However, when our office is in Virginia, some of the employment laws out of Virginia are not that favorable. And it costs us a lot more in staff salaries because of certain requirements of Virginia. So it's not just the physical address of the building as in the building itself. It's also the laws that we have to comply with. That there could be ones that are much more conducive to us being able to retain staff and keep within our budget at a different location. So that is a consideration that a lot of people don't think about. But the biggest problem I have with the Alexandria office has nothing to do with it being near DC or not near DC. It's that it's not functional. It's just not good for us. It's a townhouse style business condo where the square footage on paper looks like it's plenty until you realize it's divided between 3 floors. So that means we can't really have functional fundraising events there because everyone's split amongst 3 floors. There's nowhere where you can have a speaker where people can assemble around them and hear them talk. It's just completely non-functional for us. We can't even have an LNC meeting at our own building. When we go to Virginia or DC to have an LNC meeting, we have to rent someplace. We can't even have a meeting at our own building where on paper there's sufficient square footage, but not when it's split amongst 3 floors. We need a single floor with that square footage. So I would be perfectly fine with selling that building and buying one up the street that was just floor plan wise functional for us. This is not functional. There's another reason why this building isn't desirable is we are losing out on free advertising. What do I mean? Because it's a condo office, there are really restrictive property covenants in place. So the only signage we can have, if you've ever, I should have pulled up the picture of me standing in front of the sign. It's about this big, and it's a brass plate that says Libertarian National Committee. It's only about this big. If we owned our own freestanding building, perhaps in a different area of town, we could have big ass signage. That is free advertising. We can have street side signage. We can't do that where we're at right now because it's made to look like a residential complex. It's office condos. Those of you who aren't familiar with it, the offices, it looks like row houses, but it's office condos, so it's very, very understated. There also isn't sufficient parking. So there's a lot of reasons to get rid of this particular space that have nothing really to do with its location, that have to do with it not functional for us. But as I said, there are some location issues, such as Virginia employment laws. So some people, and I'm going to go back and answer some of these questions. I'm just trying to keep what I had in my head, while I'm still coherent or semi-coherent. It's also true that Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia, real estate is more expensive than in other areas, and that we could get a more functional building for less in a different state, and perhaps a state without state income tax. Like there's a lot of options. There's a lot of reasons why it might be a good idea. Now, why it might be a bad idea. This probably isn't the best time to sell real estate. If we wanted to sell it, last year probably would have been better. Prices are falling. Now, of course, that means we could probably get something for cheaper too, but there's a lot of considerations here. It might not be a good time to sell. We actually need a commercial real estate expert on an exploratory committee to be able to answer these kinds of questions. I ain't an expert in that. I don't know. I just know the building's not functional. But there's a lot of things that people who know a lot more about this would need to answer before any kind of decision could be made. Yeah, we did used to rent office space in the Watergate. Somebody mentioned that up. Yes, that Watergate building. We did, and it was the last rental we had. We used to rent space in the basement of the Watergate, and I guess that was cheaper, and then we got one on an upper floor. Our rent, from what I heard, this seems awful high to me, but I've heard this from multiple people. Our rent was $10,000 a month in the Watergate. We don't have any mortgage right now. The building is paid off. So, hopefully now with some facts, people are not freaking out. We will have an office building. The only question is, do we sell this one and get a different one? That is the only question. So, hopefully that starts to make a lot more sense to people. But whether this is the right time or not, there's a lot of questions when it comes to that. So Nathan asks, how often is there anyone physically in the building? Robert Kraus lives in Virginia. He's always, well, I don't want to say always, like he's not there 24/7, but he's there regularly. But I think he's the only one is the one that's there regularly. We used to have a lot more people there regularly, and then COVID kind of destroyed that. Most of our staff and contractors are remote. So, that's one interest here there. Let's see here. I'm going to continue. with it being an action item at convention, Nathan, I do not agree on that. Oh, and Kathy says Matt Hudson is there. And I'll tell you why. This is not the kind of decision that a group of 1,000 people make. It's the type of decision that I do think is the type of decision that a governing board needs to make. The decision to initially buy a building, I do think that was ran by convention. And if we were considering initially buying a building for the first time, yes, I do think that is something that needs to, it's funny, when Death says good vibes, that is funny. I've got a dark sense of humor, though. The decision to initially buy a building, I do think needs to be a mandate at a convention. But once we have real estate, I do think it's in the purview of the governing board to decide on the best location and allocation of resources. We don't take what we're going to pay staff, who we're going to hire to convention. A building is far less important than who our executive director is. So things like that, I would not agree. I do think there already is a mandate to have a building, and where it is, that's properly the purview of the LNC. And there's a problem with those sorts of things at convention, and I'm bringing this up to the convention committee, though there's nothing we can do about it for 2024. We still have conventions like were the size and activity level that we were in 2012. 2016 changed everything. We always run out of time now. Our conventions need to be restructured, because we never have enough time to do business. Dave, I don't know what the current building is worth. Again, that's never been my particular interest or area of expertise, which is another reason why I do think this needs to be sent to a committee to study the issue, because a lot of people in the LNC are like me. They're know very little about commercial real estate. I just know the horse sense things, like it's not functional. We can't have an LNC meeting. I think it was a stupid decision in the beginning to get a building that we couldn't even have an LNC meeting in. That was a terrible decision of a past LNC. Not getting a building. I think getting a building was a fantastic idea. Getting this building was not the best idea. And I can understand why the decision was made. I don't think how truly non-functional it was. I mean, the idea we couldn't have an LNC meeting in it right away, I think is pretty obvious, though they've tried. There's video on the Historical Preservation Committee's YouTube channel. Go to about 2015, I think, and you'll see them all cramped into the basement of that building. And boy, does Alicia and Nick Sarwark look uncomfortable, because they're basically on each other's lap. And you could not have any observers. It was awful. And tables were like it was like T-boned to each other. No. That's one way to have a short meeting, though, I'll tell you that, because you don't want to be that close for terrible. And yes, Todd I would expect that Todd would know what the building is worth, but it was paid off prior to this LNC, so I don't know if that's something that's that much on Todd's radar, but I would think so. I would think we have to appreciate and depreciate it on FEC reports, so I would guess Todd would know. Angela probably knows. I don't know. And Starchild suggested what you're suggesting, Nathan, is to get an old church building where we could put out a big-ass sign, and it would be a cool, interesting building. I'm all on board with that. I think that would be super cool and super interesting. So one reason why we would not choose New Hampshire, I know people are going to be upset to hear this. One of the requirements for a new headquarters, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that it needs to be near a hub airport that's cheap. So that if we're going to have fundraisers or we're going to have LNC meetings, that it's convenient. And Manchester is not a hub airport. So, yeah. But I could be outvoted on that. You know, I don't know what the rest of the LNC thinks. That's why we're having a discussion. I'm just basically telling you my thoughts and reacting to the extreme freak out on social media. And again, some of the freak out is understandable if you think that what was going to be discussed is selling the building and not getting another one. But there are people who perfectly understand that that's not what's being discussed, and they're freaking out anyway. And that's not a reasonable freak out. That is not a reasonable freak out whatsoever. That's just people looking to freak out. But hopefully, if you had any kind of misunderstanding, you now realize that this is not a big deal, that this is exactly the type of fiduciary decisions that have to be made every few LNCs. Even if we got another building somewhere else, 5 years from now, that might not be the best location or decision. Things change, like settle down, Beavis. All right. Okay, so hopefully, I'm waiting to see if there's any more building questions, but hopefully that helped. But again, no decisions are going to be made this weekend. Rich Bone has made it clear. He asked for 30 minutes to discuss, and he said he's not going to move to extend time. He wanted to get a feel for where everyone was at, and he's going to bring up any motions or motions to create a committee, either on the LNC email list or at a future meeting. This is just to discuss. That's it. Now, another discussion item, I think it's more of an update, is if you remember last LNC meeting, the staff was given instructions to migrate from everything from Razor's Edge to Civi CRM. So if that sounded like Greek to you, I get it. Right now, we have two databases. We have Razor's Edge, which this is going to be a real simplified explanation. There's nuances here that I just don't think are terribly important to what I'm trying to get across. So we have Razor's Edge, which is staff primarily uses. And like when you sign up to be a national member, that data originally goes into Razor's Edge. That's our fundraising software. That's our fundraising database. The National Party emails, I think, go out of Razor's Edge. And then you have Civi CRM. So we're maintaining two databases. And there's about a month lapse between the two. So when I get a spreadsheet of national expired members, what I was finding is I was calling people, asking them to renew. And they're like, duh, I renewed 14 days ago or something like that. And I feel like an idiot. And then I write Robert and I'm like, do you have so-and-so as a National Party member? Because they say they renewed. And he's like, yeah, it's in Razor's Edge. It just hasn't been imported over yet to Civi CRM. That's unsustainable. We've got to have one database. And the license for Razor's Edge is a lot. I think it's like $50,000 a year or something like that. Like the Razor's Edge licensing fee is a huge chunk. Don't quote me on the figure. I just know it's tens of thousands of dollars. So staff was given, and from what I understand, I'm not going to mention a name. Anyone who knows the past LNC will be able to figure out who I'm talking about. But a past staff member did not want to mess with Civi, didn't want to bother to learn it, and so blocked every attempt, from what I understand, to migrate everything over just to Civi and to cancel the Razor's Edge. So the delay on that end has been a staff member, not an LNC member, a staff member. So who's no longer a staff member. So now that that obstacle is out of the way, the LNC directed staff at the last meeting to migrate everything over to Civi. So we're going to get an update on the migration from Razor's Edge to Civi CRM. So if you ever see the abbreviation RE, that's Razor's Edge, just in case you're curious. And then the question becomes, the money that was invested in Razor's Edge, do we then invest that in Civi CRM? That's my position. That's not everybody's position on the LNC. But I've been very clear from when I ran to now. I support Civi CRM. I support the CRM. I ran on that. I know not everyone agrees with me. And I personally think we should take whatever money we were sinking into Razor's Edge licensing fees and use that to make Civi even better. That's my opinion. There's no motion on the table or anything for that, but that will probably be part of the budget discussion, I would expect. But that's my position. But I'm going to be candid. Not everyone agrees with me on that. And I'm not going to speak for anyone else. Just listen to LNC meetings and you'll be able to figure out where everyone else stands. But that's where I stand on it. And I always have. I've always been a big supporter of the CRM. Me and Ken Molman are of one mind on that particular issue. Okay, what else is on the docket? Oh, policy manual changes. Wait, where's According to a former LNC member, all these policy manual changes that Kathy sorry, it's so ridiculous, that Kathy, Brian, and I are advocating has turned Rich Bowen into a monster that wants to sell our building. That is flat earth level lunacy. Oh my God. Kathy, how dare you? How dare you and I unleash Rich Bowen? But I told everyone there's still more changes to come, so Rich Bowen will not yet reach his final form this meeting. So there are extensive policy manual changes, yes. Most of them, and I'm trying to think if any of them really are substantive. There might be, not really, and any of them that are substantive, that word substantive, they're not majorly substantive. A lot of it is just trimming out more dead weight. And saying dead weight isn't necessarily a value judgment on the content. It is a value judgment on whether that content, even if it's great content, belongs in the policy manual, such as all the footnotes. There's like 4 pages of footnotes that we are recommending yeeting because they don't belong in the policy manual. They're great footnotes. They are fantastic footnotes. They don't belong in the policy manual. They belong in a Robert's Rules of Order training manual, not in the policy manual. So it had always been, at least my goal, and I think informally the goal of the ad hoc policy manual committee, is that we started out with a policy manual that was over 80 pages, and we wanted to get it to below 50 because nobody reads over 80 pages. There's no point in having a policy manual that's unusable that nobody reads. It needs to be the essential things. And the policy manual is not the bylaws. It's supposed to be changed often. It's supposed to be tailored to be useful to the LNC that's serving at the present time. It's supposed to change each term. That's the nature of standing rules of order and special rules of order. So, people want to freak out over the policy manual changes. I don't know what to tell you. You do you, boo-boo. But it's really nothing. The policy manual changes that I did at the beginning of this term are much more substantive than anything this committee did. Like I moved to put in protections against political vengeance removals. I wonder why I care about that. And things like that. I did those at the very first, I think, LNC meeting that we had. The things that the policy manual committee is doing right now, none of them are controversial. And any of you freaking out, again, you're going to be like the boy that cried wolf. If you freak out over everything, there is going to be something perhaps one day worth freaking out over, and no one's going to pay a whit of attention to you because you freaked out over things that you shouldn't. I know freaking out is like libertarian superpower, but literally, like Bunchy is freaking out right now. That's unsustainable. You can't freak out like that all the time. People will stop noticing. You hear me, Bunchy? I know. So the policy manual changes, really nothing to freak out about. Bylaws and ballot access committee appointments. Now, there is something perhaps here, not to freak out about, but there actually is something substantive that combines with the ballot access committee and the policy manual committee. This may have actually gotten buried and people hadn't noticed. So I'm going to bring something to your attention that if you actually, it's a more of a substantive thing. But I want to give you some history behind it. The ballot access committee's term used to expire at the end of the term of the LNC who appointed it. So it'd be about May every year. But it makes no sense to have a ballot access committee changing over 6 months before an election. So it got moved to be in the first quarter following the election. That's too long after the election, to be honest with you. It doesn't give the new ballot access committee enough time to hit the ground running. So we are proposing in the policy manual changes that the last day of the past term's ballot access committee end in December of the year of the election. And that the new ballot access committee start its term January. That's probably the most substantive change that we're proposing. Whether that change passes or not, we want the new ballot access committee to be able to start immediately whenever the term of the old one expires. So if it ends up being December or if it ends up being April, whatever it is, we're appointing the new members at this meeting. They're not going to take their committee office right away, but we are appointing them this meeting. Deadline for applications is October 31st. So if you want to be on the ballot access committee, go to the LP homepage because you'll find the applications there. So do apply if you're interested in that committee. We are also appointing the 10 bylaws committee members. This is the national bylaws. All 10 spots are appointed by the LNC. A maximum, I think, of 5 LNC members can be on it, but there's no required LNC members. So you can have anywhere from 0 to 5 LNC members on it. So we're going to appoint 10 plus alternates. In the past 2 terms, I think the LNC's been very derelict in not appointing enough alternates. There are always drop-offs on the bylaws committee. So I am going to suggest we appoint at least 3 alternates, but we'll see. We can always appoint alternates later. I am also going to be super fussy about who I vote for and who I advocate for to be on this committee. If we don't have 10 great applicants that are in line with our vision of the party, then I'm going to suggest we appoint some of them now and the rest at another meeting because they can't start meeting till they're all appointed. But alternates can be appointed at any time. I haven't really taken a hard look at the applications yet, so I don't really have an opinion. I know there are some people that I recommended to apply who did that I'm totally going to be in support of. So we shall see how that goes. But we are slated to appoint that committee, and if we do fully appoint at least 10 members, then they can start meeting immediately. The past 2 years has revealed, and I wouldn't have thought this 3 years ago, but the past 2 years has revealed the national bylaws need a lot of work. Let me just give you some examples. It needs to make clear in there that you can't just remove officers or any LNC member. I'm using that term officer a bit more generically. Just because you have 2/3 and you don't like them because they expose the bullshit you're doing in New Hampshire. Cause needs to be defined as much as you can. You can never fully define cause, but I think an attempt should be made as it being failure to perform the duties of office or engaging in gross malfeasance. Guess what isn't gross malfeasance? I'm not going to mention any names of any former corrupt LNC members. Having a monetized YouTube channel. So that needs to be clarified. It also needs to be clarified that removal of officers requires due process. It's a fucking shame that you got to put that in libertarian bylaws, but I guess you do. We also need procedures much more clearly laid out on how to handle these affiliate issues that have come up with bad actors, like state chairs disaffiliating New Mexico without the authority of their memberships. State chairs thinking they could just dissolve a state party. Virginia, that you can expel 47 people for just signing a petition. Massachusetts, that the former board could just declare a convention invalid and that they're still in power. Idaho, that you could just refuse to call a convention and refuse to comply with state law. Vermont. There is so much that has strained the boundaries of our bylaws that just do not give enough guidance. And there needs to be better protections for members. So that needs to be spelled out. I think perhaps the Judicial Committee needs to be given more oversight in that area. I don't know. I know there are some people who want to give the National Party the power to expel national members. Hell no, fuck no, and no. I can tell you personally right now that if I know for sure that a bylaws committee member is intending on proposing that, I will not vote for them. No. Freedom is dangerous. Freedom means, and dangerous in a good way, let's put it this way, freedom is messy. Freedom is not a tame lion. You can't just throw out people. If you personally want to disassociate with them, fine. He goes, yeah, but then we're going to have the Nathan Larsons. You want to know what? You don't, that's the same type of argument that people make that go, you got to have gun restriction laws because we have school shooters. You do not risk everyone's rights because there are some bad actors. There will always be bad actors. You do not put everyone under a potential tyranny because of the rare Nathan Larsons. And he got his dessert. He died in jail. Things like that are the province of the state party, not the National Party. The National Party already has the power to issue all kinds of censures and distancing that it needs to do for PR purposes. And conventions can always expel somebody. It doesn't need to be in the bylaws. Giving the National Committee the authority to expel somebody, are you fucking insane? Really, have you learned nothing over the past 2 years? Like, that is barking moonbat. Do you remember the last LNC? They claimed I violated the membership pledge by mean words. Don't you think they would have expelled me if they could? Fuck no. No. Not today, Satan. So, anyway, sorry. I do feel strongly about that. I feel just as strongly in one direction that my good friend Joe Burns feels in the other direction. And I don't think he's a bad person for thinking what he does. Just like I don't think he thinks I'm a bad person for thinking what I do. We just disagree. And Exhibit A for not giving the National Party power to expel people is me. And there's a lot of people I don't like that are in the National Party, but you have never heard me call for Nick Sarwark to be expelled, for Bill Weld to be expelled. Like, no. You just disassociate from those people. Learn how to live with the fact that there are people that you don't like, even people that you think that are terrible people, that are in organizations with you. Because why don't we just then deport all the people out of the country we don't like? I can't be an American with, so-and-so. No. Now, I know people will say, yeah, but we're going to make it really narrowly tailored and require a high vote threshold. You want to know what? To remove me from the LNC took a really high vote threshold. Do not underestimate the mob, okay? So what else needs work in our bylaws? That's something that definitely does not need work. However, if it looks like an expulsion provision is going to get in there no matter what I say, I will work to make it less awful. Let's just put it that way. If it looks like it's inevitable, I will work on amendments to make it less awful, but I'm opposed to it in general. But, I'm not dumb. I know when something is inevitable, but I don't think this is needed or inevitable. Another thing that I think needs to change in the bylaws: deletion of a plank should not be able to be done with a 50% vote. No, this has nothing to do with the votes last time. I have felt this way for a long time. If amendment of a platform plank takes a 2/3 vote, deletion is the most extreme form of amendment there is. It should also require 2/3. There is also inconsistency in the convention standing rules between how minority reports for the bylaws committee and how minority reports for the platform committee are handled. They need to be consistent. They need to be the same. It makes no sense to be different. There's some differences between the convention standing rules with bylaws and platform that make no sense. They need to be harmonized and simplified. There were some weaknesses exposed in our bylaws that Alicia Matson and Aaron Starr brought up on the convention floor. I'm going to need to go back to my minutes, but those need to be smoothed out as well. I think it was something about dropping the lowest vote getter on something, like it said that could only be done on rounds other than the first round, or there's something really weird in the wording that I never noticed before, but they're absolutely right. So there's things like that. The bylaws really need to be gone through. But I think one of the most pressing issues is the issue of these bad actors in affiliates, that there needs to be a procedure for this, a very, very clear procedure for this. Also, the bylaws need to be clarified one way or another. I have an opinion, but as long as it's clarified, fine. And that is the secession if the chair resigns. Does the vice chair automatically become the chair? I don't care what people say, and I know Mike Seebeck disagrees with me on this, but I think Roberts is clear that unless there's an explicit provision in your bylaws, your vice chair automatically becomes chair. That isn't what happened when Henchman resigned, but it is what should have happened. Sorry, Ken, you were the legitimate chair of this party. Our bylaws need to specify clearly one way or another. My preference is that the vice chair becomes chair. To me, that's the whole purpose of a vice chair. And it's somebody that the delegates elected rather than selected internally by the LNC. But either way, we need to clear that up so that there isn't a fight about it in the future. My preference is that the vice chair succeeds the chair. That's a no-brainer to me. That's why you elect a vice chair. They're the spare. It's like having an heir and a spare. I think the non-LNC but official position of assistant secretary needs to be in the bylaws. Just like we have an assistant treasurer, they're not a voting member of the LNC. They're not an LNC member at all. But they are someone who can step in if something happens where the treasurer can't serve for a limited period of time. It keeps continuity in the duties and the functions that officers have to prepare. I know people tend to think, and I'm not saying this to boost myself up, I'm really not, But secretary is a super, super important role. And I do not think people who haven't served high-level secretary realize how much work goes into being the national secretary. The only person who does more work than me is the chair. And I don't mean me as me. I mean me as the position. Let's say the only position that has to do as much mandatory work as the chair is the secretary. Let's put it that way. Take the people out of it. Because you could always have a terrible secretary who doesn't do well. But if you're talking about people who are fulfilling in full the duties of their office. And there is, and I wouldn't have a problem with that, Nathan, if we keep alternates. I actually want to eliminate alternates. I don't like alternates. No offense, Kathy. I don't mean you personally. I love you. But I think we really overly complicate the LNC. And you bring up a good point, because there aren't alternates for other positions, just for regions. And because alternates get to freely participate in debates like on the LNC list, it basically skews the debate representation of the LNC. The LNC is meant to be 17 members, not 25. So for a long, and there's a weird ambiguity in our bylaws as well as to whether alternates are in fact LNC members. They're like Schrodinger's LNC members, and it's not clear in our bylaws. It's a very weird thing. They're contingent LNC members. It's been suggested for a while to eliminate regional alternates. I've been in favor of that for a long time. But I know not everyone agrees with me on that. But I love Kathy. I'd be curious as to what current LNC alternates think. But anyway, there's always been regional alternates. I doubt that will ever change, to be honest with you. I'm also going to say something else here that I'm not going to propose, because the bylaws need way too much work to do things radical. And I actually think getting rid of alternates is way too radical for this. We've got more fundamental things to change. I'm talking more long range. I actually am not a big fan of the regional system. I'm not a fan of the regional system whatsoever. I actually favor, well, never mind. That's not anything for this term. So it's no point in even talking about it, because we've got more fundamental work to do than restructuring the LNC. I do think the LNC needs restructuring. That's not for a presidential convention. That's definitely for an off-year convention when you have more time. But I do think we need an assistant secretary to take over the duties of the secretary, or to assist the secretary, if something happens, or, they're sick. A lot of things can happen. So I have an unofficial assistant secretary right now, but I would like to have that be a mandatory thing, just like the assistant treasurer. And it wouldn't be an LNC position or a voting position or anything like that. But it would be, it helps to build a bench. We've more than once in the history of the LNC have had secretaries that just gone either AWOL or just don't do their job. And then a subsequent secretary has to recreate minutes, sometimes out of nothing. People don't know that Alicia Mattson had to recreate like a year's worth of minutes from like scattered notes here or there. No. Let me think. What else is kind of wonky in our bylaws? That's all I can think of off the top of my head, though. I know there's more. But those are some obvious things. But the events of last year, I think, have revealed quite a few weaknesses that need to be cleared up. What else is on the agenda that I might be missing? Kathy, help me, even though you hate me now. What else do we need to clear up? Not clear up. I'm thinking still the bylaws. Oh, my God. What else is on the agenda? I know there's some other smaller things. I mean, the big thing is the budget. You know, there's some candidate support proposals, things like that. But I think that those are the big things. Is there something that I'm missing? Why do I think there's something? And I can't pull up. No, I don't have authorization on this computer to pull up my LNC drive, or I'd look at the draft agenda that I prepared for Angela. But I think that's pretty much it. Kathy has left because she hates me now. My God, you're driving me to drink, Kathy. What else? What else? What else? I think that's it. So do you guys have any questions? We really haven't had any motions. This LNC gets along. I probably shouldn't say this. I'm probably hexing the living crap out of us. But this LNC just gets along real well. Except for that David Dassling guy. But besides that David Dassling guy, because he's an asshole. Everyone knows he's an asshole. We get along super, super well. I did send Angela... okay. Well, there's a draft agenda, too, I've been working on with Angela that hasn't been shared with everyone. I did send a joke motion to Angela where I scripted out for her, move to stand at ease while the LNC delivers the chair's baby. Then we'll just get back to work. Lightweight. What do you mean you can't have a baby in recess? Hey, Mike, how are you doing? And I think, Mike, what else needs to be fixed in the national bylaws? If you've been listening, I feel like there's something that I missed. I know you and I have talked about everything that I mentioned here, but I feel like I'm missing something big that you and I talked about. And anyone else, if there's anything you can think of, please shoot it in here. And the deadline to apply for that committee again as well is October 31st. So get your applications in. And I do think we need a healthy number of alternates, because last time the bylaws committee dropped down because they went through their alternates. Like, there was a lot of attrition last bylaws committee, and I think it dropped down to like 6 people. Perfect, Nathan. Kathy, do you want to add that to the agenda that we're moved to commission Ron Paul as an on-call OBGYN? Oh. But a full rewrite's not going to happen at a national convention. You know that. Like, what's the big things that must be fixed? That's what I'm curious about. I already mentioned the due process thing. I mentioned having a clear statement on if the vice chair succeeds the chair. You're right, Kathy. You can't. Yeah, you're a low. You're a low. I'm sorry, I snorted. But, oh yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that as well. I'd like the bylaws committee actually to be bigger either. Also, not either. That made no sense. Alrighty, well then I guess that is it. But I'm sure we're going to get some last minute applications. Mike, did Rob Latham send over to the Judicial Committee the application for the Bylaws Committee? Because a lot of times Judicial Committee members make excellent Bylaws Committee members. So I know you applied. I think you're the only JC member that has applied. And Paul says, yeah, I'm thinking that as well. Paul said, I think you should appoint more than 3 alternates. I think at least 5 alternates unless last term's attrition was unusual. Last term's attrition was unusual, but I don't think it would hurt. Last term's was unusual. It really was. But I don't think it would hurt. Because you have attrition and alternates too. If you appoint 5, you'll probably end up with 3. So, and Paul applied, I believe you did, right, for the bylaws committee? All right, well, I guess that's it. I've got some work I need to do tonight before I go to bed. I've actually been going to bed early. Early for me is anytime before midnight because I've got a lot of work to do tomorrow. My campaign team is once again going out and doing more door lit dropping. I'll be glad when this election is over. Like most first-time full-run candidates, I've learned a lot this time. I enjoyed it. I would run again. I ended up raising about $2,700, which isn't bad for a town council run for a Libertarian. And we'll see. I'm very interested in how I do. Would more than willing to do it again. Part of the problem is both Wayne and I like to run for town council positions. And so, we fought over who was going to run. Not really, because we don't really fight. We had a mild disagreement over who was going to run this time for District 5. Wayne was thinking about running for mayor, and he chose not to because he thought having 2 Harloses on the ballot would be bad for my race. So that gets hard when you're both political, but we'll see. All right, I'm going to get going. Mike, did we want to record on Sunday? We talked about recording on the last weekend in October because most of my heavy work for my campaign would be over. You don't need to answer here. Shoot me a text. Let me know. All right, y'all. I'm going to get going. Love you all. I hope you have an awesome night. Bye-bye.
Given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a